Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Astro Alchemy. I'm Sarah, and I'm here with Laura, and we are your hosts for our weekly show where we cover the gate that the sun is currently moving through from a human design perspective and also from a gene key perspective. And then we cover the astrological transits that are going on during the week and in real time. So today is Thursday, October 20th. It is 3:29 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12:29 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we are kind of doubling up this week on episodes because we wanted to make sure to get the 50 out before it got too far along in the different lines that it flows through. I guess just one other piece of housekeeping before we begin. If you like our show, if you like following along, if you like the human design, gene key, astrological perspectives mixed together, please feel free to subscribe and or and share with your friends if that feels correct for you and it is in alignment with your strategy and authority and you feel like you're on our fractal. We'd love to hear from you. I will also probably mention this at the very end, but just to start us off with just that friendly reminder, if we're correct for you, let us know. Okay, other than that, Laura, is there anything that I'm missing before we dive into the human design chart?
Yeah, we'll just shout out, like, if you're watching this video and you don't know about the astrological happenings of the week, just to clue you in so you know what we're going to talk about. There's an eclipse this week. There's a Venus Cazimi, so that'll come up later, but just so you don't click out of this video right away if you're wondering like why things are written in the title and then we're not talking about it right away for you. So there you go. Just keep on listening, friends. But other than that, no, I think we're good to start sharing information. So I'm going to share is anything else you want to say, Sarah?
Nope.
No, okay. Sharing my screen. Ignore that. Here we go. Here's the human design chart of the moment. The sun moved into gate 50 since we last talked, i.e. since we last talked at you through your computer screen or phone screen. Right now, the sun is in line 2, and the earth is in gate 3. 50's title is The Cauldron, with this little caption for it being the value of historical continuity, whose traditional values serve and enrich the present and the future. It's the gate of values. Line 2, currently the sun's exalted in line 2, but 50 is over here in the splenic system. So like I said, whether it was last week or the week before, like this little chunk of the zodiac belt, Libra and Scorpio, is kind of situated in the spleen. So we're hanging out over here in our little splenic system this month, 6 weeks, however long it takes. And so 50 is part of the defense circuit. So if you look at how the spleen is situated, it has 3 channels pointing down to the root, 2 channels pointing up towards the throat, 1 little funky doodle channel that also connects to the G center, has a channel going to the heart center, and it has this little guy connecting to the sacral center. And the sacral is one of the 2 hubs. The throat is a hub of externalizing how we talk, how we, process life with one another, with talking to one another. And then the sacral is our hub of energy. It's like the source of life force and regenerative energy for our human experience. And so this particular gate is part of the defense circuit, and this channel is it the channel of continuity? I looked it up and I already forgot. I'll look at it right now. It'll be here, I think. Somewhere it might say it, maybe it won't. I don't know. Sarah, do you know the name of the channel off the top of your head?
No. Okay,
well, let's pretend it's the channel of continuity. I don't think it is. Anyways, it is an important channel for many different reasons. Sarah, did we talk about gate 59, or was that during a slight pause and we skipped that one?
I feel like we talked about 59. Actually, I have to remember what it is to, if you want to
It's the
click on.
bonding strategy. It's a very
Oh yeah,
important.
we talked, we
We
must
did
have
that?
talked about 59, yeah.
Okay, because I know we went over 6, right? Because that was in Virgo season, but I couldn't remember if we did 59 too. I bring that up. So if you're like getting into human design and you see that you have your profile number, whether it's a 1, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6, blah, 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 there are certain archetypal energies associated with those numbers. And those energies come from specific gates in the human design chart. The bonding strategy, whether you're a pursuer pursued, shyness, boldness, bonds made and broken, that comes from 59. And it connects to the emotional wave that originates in gate 6. If you think about, like before we talked about all the different emotional energies because we were in emotional center land for a while, but gate 6 is the beginning of the emotional wave. It's the mechanism that sets off the whole emotional process and that fuels 59 in the energy of reproduction. On the other side, connecting to the spleen, we have gate 50, which is the core, the heart, the root of the splenic awareness system. So it deals with instincts and laws and setting up foundational energy. Gate 50 is part of the cross of laws. And so Jupiter in human design is known as like being laws and sets up our whole incarnative process. So it has like a slight Jupiterian feel, even though it's in Virgo, but I mean, Libra, sorry, Libra. But it deals with those qualities that are part of this defense circuit. So on this side, it's about bonding and reproducing and having babies. On this side, it's about taking care of those babies and making sure that they survive. Ross, somewhere in his talks or courses, mentioned that there is a study done on children, I think that were born, was it the First World War or the Second World War? Like how, at what age were children who were orphaned on the street, at what age could they actually survive on their own? And they found that it was around age 7. If you were under 7, you were not developed enough, not independent enough to be able to survive on the streets. But at that age, which is remarkably young if you think about it, like I feel like I can't survive on my own, definitely not. Please don't put me on the street. But for children to be able to at that age, you know, take care of themselves and get what they need, that's an important factor. And like with the gene key system, there's a lot of stuff that happens in 7-year cycles. Like age 0 to 7 has certain qualities to it, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, like we talked about in previous weeks. So this gene key is, how did I get here? It's the cross of laws. It's about taking care of those children, which, you know, they need that care and affection up until at least 7 years, but you're like me, probably a lot longer. And so this energy carries the fear, because the spleen holds fears, the fear of responsibility. And that responsibility is to make sure that whoever is dependent upon you will also thrive and survive and not die. But it's like 59 has the whole bonding strategy. 27 has the energy for, what's the thematic name for it? Something strategy too. It's not your bonding strategy, it's your blank strategy. Maybe the blank will fill it in itself in my head later, but it's about how you handle resources, how you are able to sustainment strategy. No, that's not it. Maybe one of you know, you can comment below in the comments, but it's about money and resources. Like, are you a hoarder? Are you a distributor? Are you a coveter? Are you a self-provider? That sort of energy. And so that connects to the splenic system, just like our bonding connects to our emotional solar plexus. And so anyways, this energy of 50 from the human design perspective deals with responsibilities. And again, the fear of responsibility and whether that is correct for us or not. Like if you have gate 50 and your spleen is undefined, you'll feel the pressure to take responsibility for things that are probably not correct for you to take responsibility for. How do you know it's correct to be responsible for? Strategy and authority. But if you have a defined spleen, it's correct for you to be responsible for your own life and for whatever else you're invited or whatever responding to take care of through strategy and authority, whatever else. But yeah, so it's this significant energy of caring for humanity. Ra says that it's through this gate that we educate children, because like with the 6 and how it kind of feeds these lower 3 waves, the 50 kind of supports the structuring process. Those are not the most scientifically appropriate words, but I can't think of a better way to explain it. They help out. With these 3 channels: the stream of taste, the stream of intuition, and instinct. And 50 is like at the core of all 3, just like 6 is at the core of these 3 emotional waves. And so it's a significant gate and energy, because it's not just about itself. And this kind of also trickles into gene keys, because within this chapter, Richard Red says that if you need to like look at one, you kind of have to understand how all the gene keys are interrelated with one another. Can't remember exactly why he brought this up with this particular gene key, but he did. But it's true that if you really want to get to the heart of one gene key, you have to know how they are all operating in relation to one another. And the point of this particular, I mean, I guess, are we going into gene keys? Maybe we are, at least with this thought. With 50 from the gene key sense, it deals with genes and DNA and RNA and mutation, and the ability to correctly adapt and mutate. Its programming partner, like we said earlier, is 3, so the Earth is in 3, and 3 is here, and 3 is part of this channel of mutation, 60 and 3. This is one of the formatting energies that allows for mutation to happen, because you have order, then all of a sudden there's a spark, and within that spark, one of the pieces of the puzzle changes, mutates, and then it affects consequently everything else that happens after that. And so 50 works with that energy of mutation, but part of the shadow of 50, which I'll explain the themes more, but part of that is that 50 connects to the concept of corruption, and like when DNA or information is corrupt, when it's not mutated properly, and the consequences that arise from that of it, then I feel like it's like a cancer, right? You have a cell that's doing something it's not supposed to, and then it just multiplies, and all the other cells are like, okay, we'll do that too. It starts to spread in the body, and then it mutates in an unwanted or undesirable way. So 50 kind of has that vibe to it. But another human design thing before we like fully deep dive into gene keys is that it's a Wa channel. They're just like, this is a human body graph. We are human beings, and we are 9-centered beings. There's body graphs for different entities, whether it's a mammal, an insect, an inanimate object, a cell. There's 2 multi-person, multi-human being auras. One is the penta, which we've talked about previously somewhere at some point in time, so just go search for that if you can, if you want to hear about it. But the Y is, a penta is when 3 to 5 people come together, and a Y is when I think it's like 9 to 16 people come together. And the Y kind of has this gate of 50, and the way 50 shows up within Wa dynamics, and I'm gonna paraphrase Jonah Dempsey because he has a video on this on YouTube. So if you want to know more with like more probably informative stuff rather than my ramblings, go watch his video maybe, or go straight to the source and find Ra talking about Was. But the way this gate plays a role in Wa dynamics is that it's like total party, let's throw all responsibility out the window. It's also like everyone's all of a sudden really into the whole reproductive energies in groups, and also we kind of just like let what's the word, something with like wild abandon. We roam about with wild abandon when it comes to responsibility. And just like looking at my childhood and how that played out, whenever it was someone's birthday party, like the adults would go do their thing, and they did not have a care what the children got up to. I feel like things have changed in the past from generation to generation, but like with my generation, like we were allowed to like go roam on the streets without parents really being affectionate or caring for our safety, right? The parents were like, no 50 for us anymore. Let's just let the kids do their thing, because they were in their own little, their pentas, their own little, or was, whatever they were caring about. Anyways, I feel like that is maybe enough information from the human design side, except like on my end. Sarah, there anything you want to share?
Well, I just actually two things. Can we look at the 50.2 on the right-hand side and just what the 50.2 specifically? So it says the value of historical continuity, the sun in exaltation, the strength of purpose that can enjoy overcoming adversity to achieve its goals, the strength derived from maintaining one's values in the face of opposition or conditioning. And then Venus in detriment, a discomfort with adversity that may lead to determined withdrawal, a lack of strength where values are threatened by opposition or conditioning. So that's, I mean, that makes a lot of sense from what what Laura was just talking about when it comes to like the sense of responsibility. And I think responsibility has a lot to do with values, of course, because you're not responsible for things that you don't value typically. And then can we also look at the 3.2, since that's where the Earth is right now? The unrestrained acceptance of guidance. The unrelenting energy for growth will eventually triumph, the energy and potential for individual mutation. So like Laura was saying, the 3, which is the programming partner of the 50, has to do with this mutative, chaotic energy. And just interesting to note because is this where is this where the eclipse is going to be? No. Where the sun and moon will be?
I think not. I'm gonna reopen my note. I think that this particular gate ends at 1:59:59, and the eclipse is at 2 degrees 00. So I'll double check, but
right,
I'm pretty
the
sure.
next one. No, you're right. Okay, because that makes sense too, because yesterday was the first day, and then we have 4 days left of this. So like sometime on the day of the eclipse, it's going into the other gate. So more to come on that, everyone, when we talk about next week's key / gate. But yeah, no, I think you did a really good job at explaining the 50 from the human design perspective and just like understanding how it relates to the Wa and also how it relates to formatting energy in general. Is going to be beneficial for people who are interested in kind of understanding how to place themselves within the human design perspective for this particular point in time. So yeah, we can, do you want to add anything human design wise?
Well, if you're with us on YouTube, I just put up all the lines for this gate. If you want to pause and read them, you can. We've learned we're not going to go through with them all and read them to you. So if you're listening on Spotify, I don't know at what minute, right now it's 12:46, and we started at 12:29. So if you do the math, you can figure out at what minute we're talking right now and zoom to that point in the audio or the video to find the screenshots if you want to read all the lines. I think we said we were going to find this and put it in the caption, but forgot to do that. So maybe I'll remember to do that this time. But anyways, just wanted to share that. But we can move on to gene keys maybe, right? Okay, so with the gene key, we have the shadow of corruption, which I briefly touched on, the gift of equilibrium, and the city of harmony. It's part of the code and ring of the Illuminati, which is 44 and 50. The hexagram name for the I Ching is the cauldron, fire over wind. The repressive shadow is overloaded. The reactive shadow is irresponsible. And like we said, the programming partner is 3. With like the other title of it being cosmic order.
There it says channel of nurturing. So that's the
nurturing.
I think that's the name that we were looking for before. So it's the 5027 is the channel of nurturing. Which
but
again,
is that a human design name or is it the gene key name? Because
I think it's a human design name.
Okay.
Yeah. So
because like FYI for everyone on the Gene Keys website. So if you're listening, we're at genekeys.com/gene-key-50. If you go down to the side, you can look at integral human design and you'll see themes for preservation. I think it's preservation, not nurturing.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. Do I trust my right-mindedness? I don't know. But it has themes for the whole channel, like irresponsibility, nurturing, and generosity. Stream of relationship, it says, but it's really called the defense circuit, and it says that the spleen deals with intuition. And so here it says there's, the shadow of the spleen is alarm, the gift of the spleen is intuition, and the city of the spleen is presence, and that's for all the splenic gates. But anyways.
It is preservation.
I had a feeling. Anyways.
Okay, well.
Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to talk about it?
I mean, I'll mention some things and then you can probably respond to them. So something interesting that I was thinking about is that, this is one of the, I don't know how many, but keys/gates that just has the one other gate in it in the codon ring. So like a lot of them I've noticed have more than two, and this one just has two. So I think that's something that's really interesting. And then, of course, I feel like it's very in alignment with what we've been with, maybe just because we've been in the spleen for so long in our chats, because that's the way that the sun's been moving, is just through the spleen, that it does feel like, our last week 32 or a few days ago 32 talk kind of goes hand in hand with the 50, because for the gene keys specifically, Richard Rudd talks about how there is, like Lora was saying, there is this kind of corruptibility that happens within bioorganisms, or just, any type of sentient life, when it's all not working towards the same purpose. And, one of the points that she was making before is just that, there's a responsibility that tends to come up, to be responsible or not to be responsible. And because this has the tendency to, when we're dealing with, again, the fear of the spleen, like be responsible for like the self or the tribe, but not in the grander, larger scheme of things, like the kind of universal tribe. There's a lot of potentialities on the shadow side to create the corruption that he talks about, which is just that it's like, there's like your different parts of your body aren't functioning in harmony. They're working against each other, just like how we can be collectively, he talks about it like a data breach, or probably like data getting fragmented, where there's a specific process that works where, we've talked about the flow of life and the way that the universe kind of can take you down the river when you're operating correctly from yourself, from your strategy and authority. But when you're not operating correctly from there, there's the potentiality that you start to do things that are that are disharmonious to the collective energy. And that is where corruption comes in on a collective level. And it happens, like he was talking about in data, when one thing goes wrong, it's like a domino effect and everything else can also go wrong. And similarly, like in politics and in the like larger collective zeitgeist, when people are really only concerned with their own well-being and their own wants, desires, needs, fears, and not thinking about the larger perspective, there's a way that is so just toxic to the entirety, well, to the system in its entirety. And we have a lot of that going on, generally speaking, because we're still functioning collectively at the level or the frequency of fear mostly, although people are, of course, like becoming more and more conscious. There's still this collective frequency of fear, and so people are acting within their own best interest or the interest of their like direct tribe without connecting it to the larger structure that exists and underlies everything. So that's when we deal with corruption. I want to look at my notes. Is there anything you wanted to say about that?
No, words, I tend to prefer listening to things than reading them. And so I listen to the audiobook and I don't take notes, unfortunately. And I think, oh, that's a really good quote, I'm going to share that one. Oh, that's a really good quote, I'm going to share that one. And so like, I thought this was a really great chapter, but I don't remember any of my quotes. So I opened it up on my phone. So sorry if I'm like distracting and like looking down instead of at y'all, both Sarah, the computer, everyone, everything, everyone. It was like a juicy chapter. I really liked it. But can I remember what I wanted to say? No. But I thought
I'm
it was
like,
good.
story of my life. Well, that's why I have my notes too, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I have to remember certain things. The repressive nature, like he talks about on this page, is overloaded, and then the reactive nature is irresponsible. And overloaded are like the people who are essentially overwhelmed with the weight of everything, right? So they're just so they've got so much fear, so much going on, so worried that they can't really help but functioning from this place of fear. And then the reactive nature being irresponsible, it's like when you're feeling like you're not accountable for the effects of your actions, because again, you're in a state of fear. So it's really important, like the concept of fear and what fear does to the individual and to the group is such an important part of the splenic system. And also, well, it's an important part of spleen for the individual, but then if we're talking about the splenic system as kind of a larger concept that affects everyone collectively too, because of the way that the sun has been moving through this area for the collective over the past month or so. There's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of time that we need to take to be discerning instead of being reactive, it feels to me, because like I've said in past episodes, like when we react from a place of fear, there's a specific tone to it. Like we can tell that it's fear, and fear tends to morph and switch shapes and hide behind different qualities. And so if you get rid of one fear, like you'll find quickly that like that wasn't it. You're going to find it popping up somewhere else. And then you're going to have to try and get rid of that. And the idea is that you just stop reacting from the place of fear, not that you can ever fully absolve yourself of it. So, and I know I talked about this in the last episode, because it has to do it just has to do with the splenic system, and it really does have to do with the 32 as well. But that seems to be like internally what's been going on with me, where I just feel such fear, and I'm seeing how it just like will grab onto my insecurities, will grab onto my shame, will grab onto the things that aren't going the way that I want them to go, because of a sense of me needing to be in control. And it'll try and take the wheel and force my hand and make me act in ways that aren't necessarily of the highest good for the collective, or even for my individual self. And I think that a lot of people are experiencing some of these feelings right now, just from my like survey of my close knit group of friends. I can tell that there's definitely a lot of this going on. As far as the gift goes, it's equilibrium, of course, which is far different than corruption, which, with equilibrium, we're obviously finding a place where everyone is functioning as themselves, and they're being honest about who they are and what they bring to the table. And Richard talks about how when we empower individuals, because the only way to change the group dynamics is to start with the individual. When we empower individuals to be themselves, we're more able to come to this equilibrium, because then when people are functioning correctly within the substructure of the group then gets exalted, or it gets lifted up by the energy of all of the individuals who are being correct within themselves, right? Not being not self, being self. So let me see.
I thought of stuff. I can give you a break
Okay.
if you need to think. Going back, even though you moved into the gift. Well, okay, first, since we're in the gift, I'll mention on the gift something that I thought was potent within the gift was Richard was talking about parenting, and how because it's, this energy of carrying responsibility for our young, we have to take, like Sarah was saying, responsibility for ourselves. And if we don't, then in terms of like parenting, then our children, like there's a tendency to blame things going wrong on others. And so in a parenting dynamic, that's, you know, blaming the child for whatever behavioral issues it may or may not have. And if you think about it, children are just enormous sponges. When they're young, they're programming themselves. They don't have inherent, like very grounded, fixed behavioral patterns. Like it's so malleable. I mean, maybe they do, but it's still very malleable. And so these issues that the parents are probably noticing are coming from the parents. And so this Gene Key is, you know, taking the responsibility for how you raise young and how you raise your intimate little tribe, your penta, and realizing that it starts with you, and it's not just about, you know, looking at someone else, because again, like this connects to the 3 different energies from the spleen to the root. If you remember, you know, gate 18 is about you know, having issues with parents and realizing that they're not perfect and they have their criticisms. It's the energy of judgment. But then 28 is individual. It's about the self. It's about your own, you know, intuitive, instinctive process. And then there's 32, which we covered last week, which is tribal. So it's not just about, you know, I forgot where that thought was going. It's not just about, you know, blaming others, but that was one thought. Another thought that came to mind was like this corruption of data that happens. I feel like that's when we get a not self train of thought or a not self belief, and we kind of go into, I'm going to say it's a wrong direction. I'm imagining it as like, you know, you pluck a thread on a sweater and it frays and it just disrupts the harmony of the sweater. When you do that, that's like the gate 3, you know, the mutation that happens. And then 50 is like the tugging of that thread out of the sweater, and like the person's walking away and like that thread caught on a hinge of the door or something, it caught on a nail, and that person's walking away, and the further they move away from whatever it is, without the awareness, without that instinctive awareness, that sweater is going to get destroyed. And so I feel like it's that for our not self, you know, you have one little thing and you don't realize it's your not self, and you think, oh yeah, that's me, this is how I'm supposed to be doing, and you just carry on, you know, going on your day, doing whatever it is that you're doing. You don't realize the mutation, the shift that happened inside of you. That's not a correct one. That's an unhealthy mutation of not operating correctly as yourself. So that was another thought I had. I feel like there's one more, but it's more like high and lofty. So as I've mentioned, I'm looking at rave cosmology, and something that is part of rave cosmology is understanding the importance of the star Sirius. So this is going to be maybe over some of your heads. Sorry if you have an undefined head out there. I don't mean to disrupt your mental peace and like give you a bunch of stuff to think about, but I bring it up because we're in this area, this quarter of duality with these particular planetary placements. Again, if we look at the wheel, the zodiac belt, the spleen is situated in Libra and Scorpio, and these gates up until gate 1 is part of, from 7 to 1 is the quarter of duality, and Sirius is the star that is, I'm gonna botch this, so bear with my lack of understanding, is responsible. There's a certain star that is responsible for each quarter and deals with like the programming of that quarter. Sirius is responsible for this quarter of duality. And these stars have personality crystals, just like you, me, and the next guy. And just like my personality crystal is currently, well, above my head, not in my body, but it's part of me. It's what allows me to have this this animate self-awareness. It allows me to be alive, right? Sirius too has a personality crystal, and that personality crystal is currently incarnate as a tree in Switzerland. And Sirius is not going to go back into its star form. The apocalypse, the world's coming to an end, not anytime soon, so don't trouble yourself. But Sirius is no longer able to be in its home, and it is responsible for the programming of this quarter. this quarter is situated in the spleen. Like, wow, crazy. That train of thought did not click until we started talking here. Because the spleen has all these gates within this quarter of duality, this quarter of duality is going to begin to, again, unravel at the seams like this sweater. Maybe not to that extreme of an example, but things are going to start breaking down. It's going to get disruptive. Like this quality of duality, which is about relating to people, partnerships, houses 6, 7, 8 in a chart, astrological chart, deal with our relationships to others. As our society evolves come 2027, the new humans, the raves that are going to be born aren't going to care. Like, that's not what they're here for. They're not here for one-on-one relationships. They're here to be part of conscious pentas. And so I see that in the unraveling with Sirius, no longer impacting this quarter of duality it's supposed to. So I just, well, that's that. But like, I think it's really interesting that a lot of these gates that are being implicated, is that the right word? Impacted? I don't know if I'm using that word right, but impacted by this lack of Sirius are a lot of the gates in the spleen. And so I'm curious, food for thought. I don't think I have anything like concrete to say like this is how it's going to happen, but I think it's worth noting to pay attention to how the energies are going to shift, how our splenic relationship to life, to survival, to instinct is going to adapt in the coming years. Something to pay attention to. But yeah, that may have been a little too deep for you this week.
That was actually a really, really interesting train of thought that I never thought about either, that the whole quarter of duality kind of being disrupted because of the 2027 mutation. And like, even without knowing about Sirius, like you could still see how that might be true, considering we're moving into, like you said, being less concerned with one-on-one relationships and more concerned with the individual existential self. And so I thought that is actually quite interesting and a nice addition to our conversation. But yeah, I think that's a good treatment of 50. I will say one thing that you said that reminded me of something that I wanted to say was that with children and parents, and how retrograde talks about how, we're responsible for ourselves. And if we don't take responsibility for ourselves, like we end up basically projecting it onto children. But I think that it's important to note that we do this with everyone. If we don't take responsibility for ourselves, we project everything that's within us onto other people. And that's where a lot of the interpersonal dynamics that are disharmonious or overburdened, overloaded, come from, is just this projection of our own stuff that we refuse to look at onto others. And so that's why this gene key has to do with being honest too. I didn't really talk too much about harmony because, like, if we want to talk about like high and lofty conversations and like the Illuminati and things like that, it's just really the idea that when we're like, there's this perfect, let's call it a utopian eventuality, where when we're all operating correctly as ourselves, like we're going to be in harmony the same way that music is. Everything is just moving back and forth in a perfectly natural way where everyone's behaving as themselves. So that's the ideal that Richard Rudd touches on at the end in the city portion of the chapter. But I think that finishes anything I wanted to say about the 50.
I wanted to touch on that. So the musical quality, I feel like is relevant, at least for myself. Just want to share, like, I'm not a highly music loving person. If I have a piano, I'll play it. I'm used to be part of multiple choirs, so like I'm musical, but it's like not my life and passion, and I don't listen to music regularly like most people do. But I think since this transit went into effect, I've been like listening to music kind of nonstop. And one of the musicians that I haven't yet like explored is Liszt, one of the Romantic pianists, and so I'm like listening to a lot of his music. And he has his birthday on, I think, October 22nd. So he's like 8:50 sun, hits his life's work. And so as I was listening to Richard Rudd talk about this quality of harmony, and like just the orchestration all coming together, I was like, yes, like it's him. He has it. It makes total sense when you listen to him. He also has 1222, which is sort of the auditory sound channel. But anyways, shout out to this stud dude who knew how to rock the piano. But that's it. But we can move on to the astrology. This isn't the chart of the moment. This is the chart of the eclipse. This is the chart of the moment. Sarah, I don't know what you'd like to look at first.
Let's look at the chart of the moment and then the eclipse. So we touched on the fact that when we talked about this a few days ago with all of the eclipse energy and mythology behind the eclipse and some of the practical qualities of eclipses and the logistical qualities. And so we're going to look at the actual chart in just a minute, but some of the transits that I kind of just breezed over, I want to dive into a little bit more here. Because today Venus is squaring Pluto. Let's see. Yep, she went over the direct square probably within the last, 24 hours. And, she's getting ready to form the Cazimi with the sun. But any type of square with Pluto denotes just a level of power struggles, a level of underworld qualities. I think about Persephone going into the underworld and the qualities of hellishness and transformation when Venus and the sun too are making a square aspect, which squares are of the nature of Mars, with Pluto, who's the lord of the underworld. And so I think it's an important underlying energy that's now. It probably will lend itself to the overarching, the 50th gate, the feeling of overwhelm or reckless abandon or fear that leads to irresponsibility or any of those things, because there can be a controlling quality when Pluto gets involved, and really control is only for the not self for the most part, unless if it's part of your strategy and authority, yes, but most of the time, we just have to recognize that we're passengers and that we don't have a say in how things play out. So it's typically the not self that wants to be in control. And so, dealing with those types of controlling dynamics within interpersonal relationships or just internally is something to just kind of be aware of and not be, it's not necessarily a bad transit. It's a little bit on the more intense side. And so just something to kind of make a point about. Laura, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, yes, I don't know. I feel bad for the collective. It's a heavy transit. It's a lot. And it's especially a lot if you're not aware of your own dynamics at play, because Pluto does want to, manipulate how we think we have power in our own lives. But Pluto can be empowering. We can shift the story and mythology around Persephone and say, no, she loved him in the end. Don't know if it was that most healthy relationship, but she isn't attached to him all the time. She's free of him for 6 months. So yes, there is this perceived really overwhelming power struggle, but in the end, the power levels, harmonize, right? With this gene key, eventually there's an equilibrium that happens. And the point of harmony is, with equilibrium, there's an active attention towards making things equal. It's very Libra. I feel like this is a super Libra gene key. And when you reach harmony, things take care of themselves and you don't have to put in the effort into equalizing all the different things. And so we can work with Pluto in this way and surrender to the process, and in that things will it's probably not a word, but equilibralize themselves for us without us thinking that we have to do the effort. But since the sun's involved, we do think we have to make the effort. With Venus, I don't know, it's fun. But for this, go ahead.
No, it's just, you're just like, it's fun. No, I mean, the
It's
only
all
thing,
fun. It's all a movie. You gotta watch it and be like,
I
wow,
know
look
it
at all
is.
the crazy things that are happening to my human.
I know it really, I mean, it is, it's hard not to identify with them, right? But yeah, I think that too, like with Pluto, like they bring out, like for those of us that are Plutonian, we're a little bit more comfortable with the energy of Pluto. And so we're less taken off guard by it. But for those of us that don't tend to experience Pluto as a regular occurrence in our daily lives, it could be like certain information that's coming into the forefront that is like secret or dark or from, you know, bubbling up from underneath too, that that has to do with this Venus and Sun square Pluto dynamic, because there's just this quality of like something erupting because of Mars, the square aspect, and Mars having well, the square being of the nature of Mars, and
But
also Gemini, Mars and Gemini.
But on that note, if we think about like Venus right now, just on her own, she's being purified. Like she's on the far side of the sun right now because she is direct and conjunct the sun. So it's an superior conjunction. And in that, all her energy gets filtered through the sun before it reaches us. Like we talked about with the other retrogrades, how these planets, when they're retrograde, they're really close to us. And we feel their gravitational pull, we feel their neutrinos more heavily because of the proximity. Venus has distance from us right now. She is like as far as she can possibly get from us. And because of that, the energies aren't so beatingly intense and harsh and in our faces. There's this softening from the point in time that, you know, the energies come from Venus to us. They can harmonize, they can find their flow before they get to us. And so there's this quality, I feel, that like it's integratable. Like it's we can handle it. Like it's not anything that we can't handle. Well, nothing's ever anything that we can't handle, because then we die, and then that's just what we were supposed to experience.
That's
Right?
correct.
If we
Yeah.
think that death is fated just like birth. But I wanted to break a little clarification. So last week we touched on this Cazimi and how I said something about 251 years. I did a bunch of math last night. I was telling Sarah, she was asleep, but I was like sending her messages and all these audios. I was doing a lot of math and looking at the ephemerides of like around the year 700, the year 800, like that time period so long ago. What I found is that Venus, you know, she has these conjunctions with the sun when she's direct and retrograde, and they're 4 years apart, one after the other, retrograde, direct, retrograde. And it's like the 5-pointed star. And this is not a 5-pointed star, this is a hand, but pretend that each of these fingers is one of the points on the star, even though they're not equally distant apart from one another in a pentagonal shape here. Each point, for one point to replace another point, for it to like, for the whole circle to move 1/5 around of the zodiac belt. So like if you imagine there are little locks in place, like right now this Cazimi is at 29 degrees. And so we're going to say, okay, that's like a lock in it's a little mechanical point that Venus is going to plug in into the whole wheel. For that point to then move on to the next one, and the previous point to move into that point, or for them to replace one another, if you like imagine the whole mechanism moving, I don't, it's not whatever is 1/5 of 360, however many degrees that is, for it to move 1/5 around. That process takes 251 years. And then so that clicks one place, and then another 251 years pass, and another click in place. So this 29th degree, for the past 100 years or so, I think it's been like 92 years, we've had this conjunction, like this click of the pentagram has been happening in Scorpio. And now all of a sudden it's in Libra, and it's going to be in Libra for another about 100 years or something like that. But for the point of the circle to like go all the way around and recommence back where it began, if we imagine like these 5 points of the circle being 5 separate things, takes 1,255 years for like the whole cycle to happen. So I just wanted to correct myself in what I said last week, just to bring clarity in case you're trying to figure out what my noggin was trying to express. That. And so we're, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say we're in a 251 year cycle, because we're not going to have Sun in Venus Libra conjunctions for 251 years. That's a fallacy. So scratch what I said about that, because it's a much longer cycle, but we're beginning like 100-year cycle with Venus making these conjunctions in Libra. So that's worth noting. And the other points in the circle are Capricorn, Aries, Gemini, and Leo. I couldn't remember the last one in Leo. I think Leo, Virgo, but Leo. So yeah, those are my technical thoughts and opinions and qualifications to what's happening. How does it apply to you? Well, like I said, it's on the far side of the earth, so it's a more gentle, like full moon type of energy rather than like the new moon, it being intimate and close to us. It's Venus is far, we can see her, she's bright. So she has these qualities that we can externalize from ourselves and be like, okay, we see what she's doing. We see how she's playing a role in the dynamic aspect of life.
Yeah, I think that's, really interesting information to share too, because there's a lot of, like we've talked about, information on the internet. One thing I just will say in response to Venus being purified is that what in traditional astrology would be called right now, she's combust, because she's not in the Cazimi yet, but she's under the rays of the sun because she's so close. And so there is a weakening, and it's potentially lessened because of the quality of the sun being in Libra in her sign, in her home. But I'm thinking that things might just feel a little bit. Actually, you know what? Scratch that, because eclipses are next week. These are gonna be fun, you guys. I think that on the 22nd with the Venus Cazimi, that could be a really nice energy. Let's just say that's what I'm gonna say right now. And then continuously we have Mars and Gemini. We still have the Saturn square Uranus active. Both planets are still retrograde. Saturn is going to go direct in a few days here. So we're going to have Saturn direct, finally making its final movement out of Aquarius, where it's been for the past 2 years. It's been in Aquarius for a while. So we have that. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to touch on. Boop, beep, boop. Oh yeah, of course, we'll talk about this next week. I think we can save it for next week, is Jupiter going back into Pisces. I said Aries on the last video, but I meant to say Pisces at the end of the month. So just all very notable pieces of astrology that make this month, I still think, like one of the biggest months of the year. Do you want to talk about the eclipse? You want to pull up the eclipse chart?
I mean, it's basically the same. The moon just moves several degrees over. It's in a handful of days less. So I don't know, because this one doesn't have houses. But is there anything you want to comment on regarding? Well, I guess it's conjunct. The sun's conjunct. This isn't it. Yeah, it is. The sun's conjunct. No, it's not. This is the wrong one. There we go.
Okay.
The sun's not conjunct Mercury. It will be conjunct Mercury for the next one, but for this one it is not. There we go. The sun's conjunct Venus.
Yeah, so Venus is still playing a pretty big role here. And one thing that I like about human design is just that we're not looking at Scorpio like it's Venus's detriment. There's all different placements within the astrology wheel that Venus has detriment and exaltation, and if we're looking at it from the human design line and gate perspective. So even though typically we think of Libra and Taurus as Venus's home signs, which they are for astrology, and we think of Mars ruled signs like Aries and Scorpio being places where she's not as at home. I think if we think about it from a human design perspective, it's not like we're really going to have that terrible of a tone shift when Venus goes into Scorpio. It will be a mixed bag, as is everything. And so, Venus and Libra to Venus and Scorpio isn't anything to worry about. The way that some people are saying, I've seen online, it's don't do anything relationally, like after Venus gets out of Libra. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's just such intense and bad information. Because like I said before, every degree and every line and every gate of each sign, they have different qualities based on each planet. So we can look at the eclipse moving backward next time that we talk. I think we did a really good treatment of it last week, but just so that everyone could see the actual eclipse chart. Yeah, we have Venus conjoined the sun. Obviously, the moon conjoined the sun, and it's a pretty far. I mean, it's 10-degree orb away from the nodes, but when we get to the eclipse in November, it's going to be a lot closer. So I think that is everything I wanted to say.
I think that it's a good covering of everything. I don't think I have anything else to add. I feel like all the energies we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks have been a part of this. So it's like nothing is sneaking up on us, really, at least not from like the foundational astrological perspective, because like we've been observing these energies. Hopefully you have been with us. So it's not like poof, anything's gonna radically happen on the day of the eclipse astrologically, but like in terms of your own life, that depends on you and whether something actually poofs up in your own reality and brings a significant change.
Well,
I think maybe it's worth noting that like fixed signs are more implicated by the eclipses, right? Because
yeah,
it's in that sign. So Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo are all slightly more sensitive to these eclipses. Yeah.
and I think that
placements.
also important to note, like we said, like this is process oriented stuff, and I've already heard and seen instances and stories where like, you know, intense eclipse type matter materializing energies have already been at work, you know, a week, 2 weeks prior to the eclipse. So I mean, and they've been at work the whole time that we're going through eclipse season, since last eclipse season and since the nodes moved into Scorpio and Taurus, but we're already in it, like in a sense. So just to be aware of that. So yeah, there's no fear around the day of. So I think that's everything. And maybe, I don't know if this is a shorter episode or not, but I'm glad that we were able to cover the 50 in the beginning of it. We're going to do our best to cover the lines in the beginning.
Not on day 6 of it.
The gates. Yeah, we're going to try our best to cover the gates, not on line 6 of it, so that we can just be as relevant as we possibly can be. But yeah, I will once again say, if you enjoyed this, if you like what we're talking about, if you're interested in human design, astrology, and gene keys, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment if you have any questions. Our contact info is below the video, so you can check it out if you are interested in reaching out to one or both of us for anything. We do readings and the like. And we also love questions. My not self-mind, Laura's self-mind. We both love questions, so feel free to ask. And yeah, just if this is resonating, just let us know. We'd love to hear it.
All right, thanks everyone. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you on the flip side. See you next time.
Catch you next time.